Barbara Arnwine.
My pleasure to be with you tonight and to celebrate in this great honor to our democracy and those who have worked so hard to defend it. I want to start off by giving thanks to that incredible woman, hard worker, amazing leader, to Susan Lerner from Common Cause, New York, and to just thank her for her leadership, her persistence, her drive. What an amazing leader. And I want to thank her staff for organizing this great event and for inviting me to join you today. The Lawyers Committee is so thankful for our collaboration with Common Cause. Bob Egger, amazing leader of Common Cause nationally. Nationwide, this year we did something that we hadn't done since 2004. We looked out and we said, given the challenges of this year, how do we make sure that every voter has the right to vote and every voter is going to be protected in that right to vote? And Common Cause rose up and said, we will do what was done by People for the American Way in 2004, but was not done in 2008, and that's to help get some grassroots volunteers, in addition to our legal volunteers, to go out and to help protect voters at the polls. And they, with less than only about 4 to 5 months, were able to garner and put on the ground in several states over 2,300 grassroots volunteers, and that is a great accomplishment. We look forward to continuing the work with Common Cause nationwide in these efforts in the years to come. This partnership has a lot of work to do because we know it takes everything within our power to ensure our elections are free, fair, and accessible. But most importantly, we all in this room must continue to work together to ensure that every voter who is eligible and wants to participate in our democracy has that opportunity. Tonight, what an honor it is to give honor to the New York law firms that went above and beyond the call of duty to protect the right to vote this last year. As you know, last year was a historic election year, not because of turnout, but because of the unprecedented, evil, devious, vicious attack on the fundamental right to vote. From restrictive photo identification laws to cutting early voting days from 14 to 8 in Florida, and making sure, by the way, that people could not vote on the Sunday before Election Day because that was the Souls to the Polls Day. And that's where over 30%, almost 30% of all African American voters had voted that day. So they made sure you could not have voting on Souls to the Polls Sunday. Over 20% of all Latinos had voted on that day in 2008. So it was no accident that these kind of restrictions all of a sudden started being passed by legislatures. And we also saw a real vicious, another attack in several states on the ability of community-based organizations to register people to vote. So all of a sudden, the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, the Boy Scouts were all of a sudden being threatened that if they were not able to turn in voter registration cards in Florida and in Texas within 48 hours, that they would be prosecuted. These are the kinds of impediments that were new and ugly in 2008. Nothing pretty about it. These newly enacted laws threaten to disenfranchise millions of voters. The Brennan Center report said that over 20 million within 1 year. Within 1 year, from January to December of 2011, over 5 million voters were threatened by these kinds of laws. And those voters included racial minorities, low-income persons, senior citizens, voters with disabilities, and students. But we did not sit down. We did not lay on our laurels. We did something that people forgot we knew how to do, and that was we fought back. and we fought back hard. The voting rights community joined forces, something that people didn't think we knew how to do. They thought that we would be all so divided, so fragmented, so into our own game plans that we would not have the ability to reach across our organizational borders and to create alliances that were necessary and critical to this fight. But because of our joining together, because we came together, but more importantly, because the law firms throughout this country joined with the Advancement Project, the ACLU, and the Lawyers Committee, that we were able to do the incredible, important litigation that was done by firms like Sullivan Cromwell in South Carolina, by firms like Deckard in Texas, that we were able to beat back these voter identification laws, and we were able to make sure that groups were able to have the sustenance and the support and the legal materials to fight and defeat these laws in state legislature after state legislature after state legislature. You see, we created and used a map of shame to reach people in states throughout the country who people thought the one thing they said, okay, they can go into court, yes, they can fight what they want to, but they're going to lose some battles, they're going to win some, but we can win because we have the state legislatures, because once these laws are passed, people won't know what the new laws are, and there's no way to reach people individually because nobody's watching TV for these purposes, but they forgot about one thing. And that is that we can be creative, and we were able to reach the average person and say just one simple thing to them. And that was that the way you defeat voter suppression is one footstep at a time. One footstep at a time towards the polling place. Get in line. Don't leave the lines. Stand in line. Call if you need assistance. Call that 1-866 Our Vote hotline. And guess what? People did it. They stood in line for 3 hours, 5 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours. Then they remembered and they sung songs like "Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around." They sung songs like, going back into their freedom period, singing songs of "We Shall Overcome." I heard them as I stood in line for over 3 hours at my own polling place. These new laws and attempts to suppress the vote exacerbated existing problems that we see all the time, that come up every year in voting: voter registration errors, mismanaged polling places, poorly trained poll workers. In fact, in Pennsylvania, they don't even have a requirement to train the poll workers. And inadequate resources, no vote, not proper and not enough voting machines, no voting machines don't work, etc. These resulted in the long lines, people being improperly turned away at the polls, and forced eligible voters to vote provisional ballots when they should have voted regular ballots. And then to make matters much worse, 1 week before Election Day, Superstorm Sandy swept along the East Coast, presenting yet new hurdles to voters, and particularly for voters here in New York and in New Jersey, where your states don't have early voting as just a universal early open voting. And because of that, you hadn't even started that process, other than voting by excuse. You hadn't begun that process of allowing people to come to the polls. So New York, my goodness, New York is the hub of election protection nationally. Every cycle, the law firms in New York open their doors to host national call-in centers and recruit attorneys to monitor polls in all 5 boroughs. But we, like you and like everyone else, was horrified as we saw the images of Manhattan underwater. And as we traveled, and I came into the city 2 days after Hurricane Sandy, and the stories of people without power and water, and without the ability of gas and so many other things, and unable to get into the city, began to roll in. We did not know if that would be what the possibility, what the impact would be on election protection. I remember sitting in a conference room with my staff debating what were we going to do. How could we ask New York to open their doors under these situations? We knew that Sullivan Cromwell call-in center had flooded. We knew the Free Franks call-in Spanish language center, her nationwide language center, had flooded. And we knew that other firms did not know if the power would return to their offices and would they even be open. How could we ask? We asked ourselves. How do you ask people to open the doors when faced with so much devastation? But amazingly, wonderfully, beautifully, the firms did it. They banded together to make sure that election protection efforts were not thwarted by Sandy. Skadden Arps called, Ron Tabak and others called and said, we're going to open our doors to host the 1-800-VEI-VOTA Spanish language hotline. Kirkland and Ellis and Proskauer Rose hosted last-minute trainings to make sure call center volunteers were prepared. Simpson Thatcher opened their doors on that Thursday and Friday before Election Day, just days after Sandy's destruction, to host a call center to help voters in the states affected by Sandy and voters in other states that are already heading to the polls. Davis Polk and Lowenstein Sandler worked tirelessly with New York and New Jersey election officials to get out information about polling place changes and loosen rules to allow displaced voters to vote. Just days before election days, Nancy Anderson, Nancy, wave your hands so people will see you. Nancy Anderson, the head of the lawyers committees, our incredible, talented, wonderful pro bono counsel, came to me and she said, Barbara, what are we going to do? She said, I just looked at the registration volunteer deck, and we've had hundreds of people cancel out, saying that we can't do it because I don't have power. We can't do it because I can't get into the city. We can't do it because there's all these issues of taking care of my family. And the image of empty call centers was upon us. But guess what happened? By Monday, Nancy came to me and said, Barbara, miracle of miracles, every call center slot is filled. By Tuesday, we were overflowing with volunteers. That's the spirit of the New York lawyers. That's why we're here to celebrate them today, because they remembered that there is only one word that applies to their process of upholding our democracy, and that is that beautiful word, a Herculean. And that's what they did. My sheroes, my heroes, they were there. And just like the New York law firms, the American people themselves responded. They made sure their voices were heard on Election Day. Yes, as I said before, they stood in line for hours. They challenged poll workers who improperly told them they could not vote if they didn't have voter ID. They went to the polls despite deceptive billboards and phone calls and evil phone calls telling them that they could not vote or that they could vote by phone. You see, this is what we fought nationwide. These are the stories. So I want to first thank the voters of New York who fought back and didn't let Sandy prevent them from casting a ballot. I want you to know that we are still fighting for you. It doesn't stop on Election Day. We know that we got to fix the problems we saw in 2012 and that we got to expand voting opportunities in this country. Many of the EP leaders involved in election protection efforts here in New York are now working on voter reform. Dan Cove and Marjorie Lindblom on the committee, thinking about how to expand voting rights, how to make it better and easier for people to have the access to the ballot. And of course, these heroes and these defenders of our democracy are critical, because without your leadership and support, election protection nationwide could not have been possible. All I can say as we get ready to present these awards is those beautiful words to your volunteers here in New York and to the 5,300 lawyers who volunteered nationwide. There's only one thing you can say. Thank you. Thank you.